Cameroon's economy minister Alamine Ousmane Mey on Monday revealed that the Francophone country is currently working to boost export revenues to fend off a potential debt crisis and has relaunched talks with the U.S. to rejoin Washington's flagship trade initiative with Africa. Now, May, while speaking at an event organized by the Atlantic Council think tank on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank's spring meetings in Washington, said the economic fallouts from the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent global shocks provoked by the war in Ukraine have hit African countries hard, denting economic growth and aggravating their sovereign debt positions. The fund has classified Cameroon as being at high risk of debt distress, though in its most recent review of the country's loan program, it stated that with active fiscal reforms and management, the debt could be sustainable. Cameroon also resumed talks with the U.S. to end its suspension from the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act called AGOA Initiative, which actually grants qualifying African countries tariff-free access to the U.S. market. This morning, we're being joined by engineer Elvis Bane, who is a social entrepreneur from Cameroon. Yaoundé, Cameroon, to be precise. Thank you so much, Elvis, for joining us.
It is a pleasure being on your program this morning.
Now, let's start by doing a bit of evaluation on Cameroon's export trade. How would you describe the export trade of Cameroon in terms of its volume, its quality, and contribution to the country's economy, vis-a-vis the debt crisis that it is trying to avoid?
Well, you know, when we talk about the export in Cameroon today, I would say it is simply one that for the past over 60 years has really not benefited the country. It has really not benefited the common man per se. Reason simply being that we talk about exports here where we are more concerned with exporting raw material, which is sold out to countries out there in the diaspora at a relatively very cheap rate, at giveaway prices, as opposed to what we get back in return when it comes to the import. So when you talk about exports in Cameroon, I think that Cameroon still has to go a long way to be able to revive its exports and see into either we can transform our raw products into finished material and rather export by this finished material. I think that's the only way by which we can be able to make way forward when it comes to the benefits that we may have to gain from it as a country. You know, if for the past 60 years, you see the Cameroon minister, for instance, Alamine Ousmane Mey, still struggling to negotiate and talking about improving on the export sector, I want to think that after 60 years, nothing will change if we do not, first of all, as a country, review our strategies and we review exactly what it is that we stand to export. Cameroon does not lack the raw material. For that one, it is certain. But the truth is that no country actually grows just by exporting raw material. We need to be able to transform this transform this material into finished product. I think that is where we can get some reasonable income out of it that can be able to change the situation back here in the country.
But then, Elvis, what about the time or the period in between Cameroon was under the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act put forward by the United States of America, as at the time that this pact was signed and Cameroon had free access to export its trade or export its commodities, whether it be raw or processed, to the United States, and there's this kind of rapport between the United States. So are you saying that even during that time, Cameroon did not get more revenue from the commodities we're able to export to the United States as at that time?
Now, you know, when we talk about getting more revenue, let me tell you honestly as a Cameroonian that one thing, you know, when we talk about democracy in the world, it has to do also with transparency. And this transparency should touch on all the different areas of governance, including finances. Unfortunately, in our context back here, sometimes the people are not even informed exactly as to what the government is getting into as maybe partnerships or, I don't know, trade deals with other countries and all and not. Cameroon was expelled from AGOA. Today they want to get back into it. But the question is, like you are rightly putting it, what were the benefits while we were under AGOA? Because we have remained that backward country from time immemorial. From time immemorial. So what did we benefit when we were under AGOA? It would be difficult for a common Cameroonian to tell you that this is what we benefited when we were under AGOA and this is what we stand to lose or what we have lost from the moment we were expelled from that association or organization, simply because, first of all, in terms of transparency, the common man or even the people who matter, like the journalists who are supposed to relay information to the public, sometimes are not even given that information. Secondly, if under AGOA there were some benefits, one thing I would tell you is that Cameroon per se is a typically corrupt nation. I'm sorry to say this, but that's the simple truth about it. We are a typically corrupt nation, such that at the end of the day, even the process that might have even come in under AGOA, they end up in the pockets of some few individuals, and so do not necessarily get back into boosting development as far as the entire nation is concerned. So that's why I said, and I will repeat again, that the most important thing here is not whether we belong to AGOA, it's not whether we are exporting or not. The truth is that we export, but the moment we keep exporting, permit me to say, the wrong product, you see, it will not permit us grow. Secondly, the issue of governance, when it comes back to the corrupt system in the country, even if we have finished products today and we export them at reasonable prices that could help the country grow, the corrupt nature of the country is still one that is a serious handicap. So we have a problem of governance back here in Cameroon. We have that problem of corruption, and then, like I say, the issue of the fact that we keep talking about exporting raw material instead of finished products. So to me, it is not really a matter of if we belong to AGOA or not.
But then, Elvis, let me take you up on that, because you're saying that due to corruption and accountability, it's been impossible for Cameroon to make as much money that it should from its export and its trade to the United States. But then, according to reports, we understand that Cameroon's export trade value to the United States was just below 3%, and so it couldn't have made as much money that it would have hoped for, and the GDP wouldn't have risen to the projected target that it had hoped, because the value that it was getting from what it was exporting to the United States was minimal, and it was not that significant. So where do we place it? Does it have to do with corruption, or the fact that what Cameroon was exporting as at that time was not cogent or quantifiable enough to say that Cameroon could get more money from it?
I think we are practically saying the same thing over and over here.
There's a bit of difference. There's a bit of difference, Elvis, because we're talking about the economic importance of the trade pact that US had with Cameroon. So if you are saying it is corruption, but facts are telling us that it's because what Cameroon exports and what it gets, it's not much, it's not enough, because when you look at what Cameroon, in terms of trade volume and the quality of the pact that Cameroon has with China is 23%. So when it comes to trade pacts and bilateral trade, Cameroon has a significant, stronger bilateral trade with China, 23%, but with US, it's just 3%. So how would you expect them to make much money when what accumulates in terms of what is being traded between the both of them is just about 3%?
Good, let me answer you again. I started by saying, if you want to trade with the US, for instance, and of course we know that at one point in time the deal was one where Cameroon perhaps could even export for free, you see, but now the quantity, in terms of the quantity of what is sent to the US may be minimal, and so cannot earn them much. It comes back to what I started by saying, that first, when we talk about exporting, we should be able to get finished products, you see. Now, when you are selling out a very minimal quantities, first of all, come back, let me take the mining sector in my country, for instance. You will get to realize that we have products, we have raw material, then now, what mining companies do we have, for instance, in Cameroon? Who are the people who do the mining to be able to export? If Cameroon is going into a trade deal with the US, when they already prioritize China, for instance, in that same field or in that same sector, then you understand that there is a problem. It means they need to step up production. They need to step up the quantity of what they need to send out. But that is something they have failed to do. And that's why I said that it is not just a matter of belonging to a particular organization, but that they need to review their strategies and review the way they do their things. You cannot want to gain much when you send out very little. And why do we send out little? We send out little because the adequate measures have not been put in place to be able to step up that production, even in terms of the raw material itself that they have to sell to the US. So it comes back, like I said, to the issue of governance. The policies that are put in place by the regime in place need to be reviewed. They need to think of stepping up the production of even the raw material per se. Let's even talk about the finished products. Even if you have to limit yourself just to the raw material, let them be able to step up the quality of it, You see, but the adequate measures have not been put in place to be able to do so. If you come back again to the country, you realize it would take maybe, should I say, a Sonara, for instance. Sonara has never produced up to the required or the targeted estimate of what they could, should I say, the maximum of what they could get to per year. They have never done that. But has the state been able to put in place measures to step up the production? They have not done so. So getting into AGOA where you may have certain advantages, but not trying to step up your potentials, your capabilities when it comes to production, I think that's where the problem lies. And that's why I'm accusing the regime in terms of governance, in terms of its policies, in terms of its strategies. In other words, we have people who prefer to go more into theory and they announce to you lofty ideas as to what they will do or what they can do, but practically on the field, they do not put in place the strategies and the principles that matter to enable the country to boost up that in the different areas. Cameroon is an agricultural country, typically, if we may say so, but come back to the country here, farmers are not encouraged. Farmers are not followed up, farmers are not subvented so that they can step up their production. It is more of some sort of subsistence agriculture that we are talking about here. But now, if you cannot expect that people who go into some sort of subsistence agriculture can be able to provide for you the necessary raw material that you will export if at all you don't want to get into the level of production. So I think it goes back to the issue of policies. It goes back to the decision makers to be able to take the right decisions and implement them well on the ground such that they can step up the production.
All right, you've talked about the agricultural sector and, of course, the mining sector. And we are aware that Cameroon is facing a debt crisis, as it were. And you've also talked about the fact that if the right policies are put in place and, of course, reforms are implemented as it should, then there could be a positive turnaround. But then I'm looking at these two sectors that you mentioned and all other critical sectors of the Cameroonian economy. Now, would you say that if the Cameroonian government gets it right, it will be able to raise the amount it needs, or be able to generate more revenue enough to pay its existing debts?
Cameroon is capable of paying her debts if the right policies are put in place, if the sectors that matter are subvented by the state of Cameroon, so that the production is stepped up to get to certain let me say quantities. You see, they can be able to raise or generate a certain amount of money that may not totally clear off their debts. They could be able to clear a certain portion of a percentage of these debts. But unfortunately, like I say, the real issue here lies just in the fact that what the government in place does not follow up. And like I say, even in areas where certain budgets are being voted to subvent per se, at the end of the day, there is no accountability. Such sums of money end up naturally in the hands of some individuals, and at the end of the day, no one is ever told exactly what happened to this money. The people concerned are never called to book to actually explain what happened, what they did, or what they did not do. So, like I say, governance is the issue. Transparency is the issue Cameroon is facing.
All right.
We have the resources, be they natural, be they human.
All right, Elvis, let's look at other attending issues. That is the COVID-19 pandemic that ravaged so many countries all over the world. We talk about insurgency. We know that Cameroon was part of those that actually faced issues with terrorism and internal wranglings and fightings and all that. And we also have this global shock that was occasioned by the Russian-Ukraine crisis. And so many African economies are still trying to grapple with this economy and to live above what is necessary. So how bad would you say the Cameroonian economy was hit by these other debilitating factors?
I think to begin with COVID, but when you take COVID and the Ukraine war, I think that these two are just some sort of pretexts that our government now hangs on, because from 2019, for instance, till today, the regime in Yaoundé will not tell you anything to justify their lapses without hanging on the issue of COVID. Certainly, COVID had its impact on Cameroon. Certainly, the Ukraine war had an impact on Cameroon, but we cannot entirely want to give the impression that things today are so handicapped because of Ukraine and COVID. After all, if you come back again, you will discover that just with respect to COVID in Cameroon, for instance, thousands upon thousands of billions were embezzled with respect to this COVID, which till today, again, like I say, no one has ever been giving an account as to what happened to those billions. When you come back to the Ukraine war, I think that the war only came into expose the lapses that we have been going through for the past 60 years, and it should have rather been a stepping stone for us to learn and then implement and ameliorate in certain sectors, coming back again to agriculture, for instance. But the fact that the government keeps hanging on COVID and the Ukraine war to justify failures, I don't think that is any reason enough. To me, rather, these are two, how do I put it? These are two things that the government should have rather take as an advantage. They should have been stepping stones to permit the government review its strategies and then move forward. Come back to to Ukraine, for instance. With the advent of that war, you realize that Africa per se was hit, and then the issue of maybe flour, you see, became scarce in Africa. But from there, we have individuals who have come up with initiatives today, and they are trying to promote the cultivation of wheat and other issues. We have tubers in Cameroon that could be transformed into flour. But like I earlier mentioned, why will the government not put in place plants, companies, industries that can transform the tubers that we have in Cameroon into flour, such that we fight the issue of scarcity in flour? To constantly remind the world that we cannot make way forward because of the Ukraine war and all that. To me, like I said, it's just a pretext to justify certain lapses because the regime doesn't want to think squarely. So I think that it is not the Ukraine war and the COVID, to me, should not be reasons why Cameroon should remain where it is today.
All right, now, Cameroon is holding talks and is trying to rejoin the trade initiative with the United States. Moving forward, I'd like to know, what are the chances that Cameroon's economy could be transformed or would be transformed? What are its offerings, and what drastic or dramatic change do you think can come to Cameroon by the way of this pact?
Before we get to that, sir, I would like to first of all remind, if Cameroon is holding talks today to get readmitted into AGOA, we should go back to find out why were they in the first place exempted from AGOA. It was because of gross violation of human rights in Cameroon with respect to the war, for instance, in the former British Southern Cameroon particularly. I don't think that the situation as of now has changed. And the US, who decided to exempt Cameroon, I think they have all it takes to go back and investigate and find out if the human rights situation has improved in that part of the country before we even start thinking if Cameroon should be readmitted. Secondly, if Cameroon has to be readmitted, what impact will it have on its economy, like you put it as a question? I would still want to say again here that what I think is that we should focus more on home production and the transformation of home products, and then we now see how we can export these home products. If we have the companies, if we have the industries that can transform our raw material, we cannot lack the market, and it will permit us automatically to improve in terms of income. But now, if we cannot even transform in the first place, and even the raw material, I say, we could even produce more than that which we produce now, I do not think that joining AGOA or reintegrating AGOA will change anything. Let us step up production of the raw material. Secondly, we think of how we can, first of all, process these products into finished goods before we think of exportation. I think in that line, Cameroon will be able to have a positive impact that even the common man will be able to feel and testify to that.
But then I'd like to find out, is it that Cameroon's economy is not diversified or fully diversified? Because when you make mention of what is necessary and should be done in these critical sectors, it seems as though there's a bit of huge concentration, or aside the fact that you mentioned gross inappropriation in terms of policies and implementation, it seems as though Cameroon does not have enough economy, or a kind of economy that could spread its tentacles to all the sectors that could bring about the finances that it needs. So talking about diversification, how would you describe Cameroon's economy?
Well, describing Cameroon's economy, if I get your question well, I will want to think, permit me use the term, I would say it's somehow it is static. It is static. It really doesn't advance. You see, because when you talk and mention diversification, remember Cameroon has always been described as Africa in miniature. That is to tell you that anything you can find in any part of Africa, be it in terms of natural resources, be it in terms of human resources, in fact, in terms of culture, in terms of anything, you will find that in Cameroon. The problem here is that Cameroon is underexploited, even by the regime in place. That's what I'm trying to say here. We are underexploited. In other words, we could do far better than where we are today, but for the fact that Cameroon as a country is not given that opportunity by the regime in place, you see, to showcase totally what it is capable of doing. Cameroonians are not given that opportunity to exploit their own resources and put in place fully their own potential as they might have loved to do. Because like I keep insisting, it is all about a matter of politics. It's like we are in a situation where they would rather prefer to maintain the people in that poverty-stricken nature where they are, so that you remain some sort of loyal to a particular system. That is the unfortunate situation here. If our leaders were open-minded, you see, like you put it, they can. We have resources. We have, even in terms of culture, we can diversify and make money and generate income from almost every other sector you can think of that you may see in other African countries. But that is not the case. We have everything, but the necessary measures are not put in place. That is the real problem we have in our country. So talking about the Cameroonian economy, it is really not making way forward. That's what I can say about the economy in Cameroon.
Finally, if I let you go, what would you say as regards the Apex Bank in Cameroon? What has been their role? What has been their function and the contribution to the Cameroon economy? Have they put out policies also that you would say have driven Cameroon's economy in a positive trajectory? Or you would say that whatever it is they've done in the last 10 years so far has negated and not contributed much to the country's economy?
Can you come again? Which bank again?
Yeah, I'm talking about Cameroon's Apex Bank. Yeah, so I'd like to know what their function has been so far. Yeah, the central bank or Apex Bank, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when we talk about the banking system, first of all, I will not talk about Cameroon particularly here. I will take Central Africa.
Okay.
You see, you will understand that it is all about the policies. It is all about the leadership. The banks per se may have good policies. The banks per se may have, in their vision and perspective, projects that they can accompany. But it comes back to the will of the decision makers if they are willing to work in line with some of those projects, yes, that can permit the country, and why not perhaps even the sub-region, be able to make way forward. Coming back to the issue of banking, you will take me back to something like the World Bank, for instance, or even the IMF. You will discover that at one point in time, as far as Cameroon is concerned, you realize that these are people who are not reliable partners that we may even have to deal with. Because at the end of the day, they will talk to you about a possible 4.3% increase that Cameroon could witness and overnight. But at the end of the day, they have been there for more than 10 years, for more than 15, 20 years. And they know how bad the system is in terms of corruption. So like I said, the problem is not the banks and what their intention or goodwill to want to accompany the country to progress. The most dedicated issue we are facing here is the leadership we have in our country. That is the problem, and that's what I keep insisting on. Leadership is the problem we have back here in Cameroon. We have people who generally per se do not think Cameroonian. People who are not patriotic. That's how I will put it. People who are more concerned with their personal interest than the common good of the country as a whole. And that's why I will tell you again that corruption becomes some sort of a norm in Cameroon because people can embezzle at will, and at the end of the day, no one is ever questioned. So the problem is not really the banks, you see, the problem are the policies and the people who are supposed to put drive across these policies and see into it that measures are taken to accompany Cameroonians.
So it begs me to want to find out from you, Elvis, if you see better than the IMF that has projected that Cameroon's economy would grow by 4.3%. So as at 2020, Cameroon's economy grew by 0.05% thereabouts. But they are being optimistic, as it were, saying that looking at the reforms and the efforts or the policy trajectory or positioning of the Cameroonian government, there is a possibility that growth will come to Cameroon's economy by 5.3%. So is it that you see better than the IMF, or IMF is not seeing in your light or in your perspective what the Cameroon economy is likely to face?
It is not that I will not claim that I see better than the IMF. What I would rather tell you is that the situation in the country is so glaring that any common man can read. Unfortunately, the World Bank, the IMF, are all political institutions, and they have their own political interests, and which must not necessarily be that of the interest of the people of Cameroon. I don't want to say the state of Cameroon, because, like I say, the IMF, for instance, and the World Bank have accompanied the government in this country for decades now, but the truth is that corruption has been at the apex, and each time they have disbursed huge sums of money to this government, at the end of the day, tangible accountability has never been given to any one of them, but at the end of the day, they keep giving in more money. So you understand that at the end of the day, like I earlier mentioned, these are institutions which are not the best of partners we can trust to want to work with. They know fully well that with the present dispensation, with the present corrupt system, nothing good can come. It's true, they can earmark, we may grow by 4.3%, but that will be on condition that there is transparency. That will be on condition that corruption is at least combated to a certain positive percentage. But you cannot want to think that we can grow by 4.3% when we have in place the same system that has been so corrupt and bad for the past 20, 30, 40 years, and you have been working with them without results, and you think that things are going to change. That's why I say IMF to me or the World Bank are not trustworthy institutions that we can go and work with. Let me take an example of Tanzania. I think, under late Magufuli. He did so many great things in his country, but without ever turning towards the IMF or the World Bank or China for certain loans and all whatnot. But why is it different with Cameroon with all the loans we get on a daily basis from these institutions that have all the powers it takes to be able to check the government of Cameroon when it comes to certain excesses, but they do not do that. So to me, those are not genuine partners we can want to think that we can grow with them. Not because I see beyond them, but that the facts are so glaring that even the common man can see in the streets. But unfortunately, the IMF turns a deaf ear, they turn a blind eye onto the corrupt system.
Okay.
They keep pumping more money into an economy or into a country, knowing fully well it ends in the hands of private individuals, and they keep giving you the impression that things can change. Things cannot change if you keep committing the same errors and hoping for better results. Let us go back and fight the worm that has eaten deep into the fabrics of the system and has spoiled everything. Okay. Corruption is a problem in Cameroon. It can be fought even with the help of the IMF and the World Bank, but they are not willing to do so. So, to me, I don't see better than them, but I think that they are playing a certain game that, at the end of the day, they know what they stand to gain behind, at the detriment of Cameroon as a state, and at the detriment of the Cameroonians, but not the regime in place.
All right. Thank you so much, Elvis, for speaking with us this morning. It's very important that the government gets it right in terms of its policies and its programs, because that's the only way that growth, economic prosperity can not only come to the government, but also trickle down to the ordinary man, the ordinary citizens that live within the country. But then we appreciate your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.